Good morning, everyone, and I'm reconvening our council meeting for Tuesday, April the 4th. Council's just returned from an in-camera session where we went through a training and education session. I will note that prior to us going to in camera, I did call for a disclosure of pecuniary interest, and Councillor Hodgins, through the nature of his employment, has declared one for item 12.5B. So let's really hope that April showers do bring May flowers. With all the rain, it really does feel like spring. And I would like to take this opportunity to remind you and encourage you to get out and support local as you fulfill your spring needs, whether it's getting ready for gardening or purchasing some last minute Easter treats or starting to think about Mother's Day. It's never too early to think about that. Going out for lunch or dinner or looking to pamper yourself with a spa treatment. There are lots of Luke and Biddulph shops and services that can help you out. So right now, in partnership with many of them, Discover Luke and Biddulph is running a local passport shop local campaign. So to learn more, I would ask you to look for details on our social media or the monthly e-newsletter that just went out. I also want to remind everybody that April is Be a Donor Month. Organ and tissue donors save lives. Do you know that one organ donor has the ability to save 8 lives? My family, both immediate and extended, know the importance of becoming a donor. We have a family member who is in the end stages of his assessment for a heart-lung transplant. And while this transplant is very rare and the chances of a match are very slim, without donors, my nephew will not even have a chance. It is incredibly easy to become a donor. You can register to be a donor at beadonor.ca. And more importantly, you need to have a conversation with your family and friends, letting them know your intention to become a donor. These are difficult decisions to have, but they are necessary. In our family, we recognize that we cannot take our organs and tissues with us. So we have all registered to be donors in hopes that someone will benefit from transplantation. If you have not done so, please recognize Be a Donor Month and register to be a donor. We do not have to go into public meeting this morning, but we do have a delegation, and I am very happy to welcome Lisa Courtney in person. We have had lots of meetings with Lisa over the years, and over the last few years, they've all been on Zoom. So it's great to have Lisa in her office in person. And I will turn it over to you to walk us through our draft DC report.
Thank you so much. And yeah, it's so nice to be back in front of everybody and not have to fight a cat while I'm trying to do Zoom. It's great.
You should have brought the cat with you. We could have all met the cat.
Oh, I don't think you want to meet Dip the cat. That's so as Mayor said, I'm here to talk about development charges. We've got your draft background report ready. So today I'm just going to go over the development charge process just briefly, talk about your current development charge bylaw, and then get into the development charges for 2023, the projects we've included, and then the calculated amounts, and then get into the next steps of the development charge process. So if you could advance 2 slides, please, and thank you. Perfect. So we collect development charges from new residential and non-residential growth. We do not collect development charges from existing development, and development charges are calculated based on your capital works plan that's set out in the development charge background study. So that background study includes projects, and those projects are what you can collect for through development charges and what gets paid for through development charges. There are lots of rules around development charges. There's an entire act that sets out how we calculate development charges, what you can collect for, and what you can use the money for. And it's a fun mix of accounting, planning, and engineering. So it's everybody's favorite dinner topic. Development charge money goes towards development charge projects, as I said, and it's my job to calculate your development charges, but ultimately it's up to council to set what the charge is. I'll basically tell you the ceiling and you can charge there or at an amount lower. You can't just go above that. Next slide, please. So we calculate development charges for both residential and non-residential growth. This is so that residential is paying for residential share and non-residential is paying for non-residential's share. You'll see development charges for residential charged out on a per unit basis. So it'll be an amount for a single family house, another amount for an apartment, and another amount for a townhouse, where your non-residential is charged out on a per square foot, or depending if you're metrically minded, as per square meter basis. Typically, we have different development charges for different areas of municipalities, and this is a function of the different projects that benefit those areas. Quite often, we see this split between the rural and the urban areas, and this is because typically your urban areas have water, wastewater services, so they'll pay for those services, whereas your rural areas that don't have those services won't pay for that. Next slide, please. So overall, the amount that your development charges are is reflective of what projects you're doing. If you're doing lots of big projects, if you are undertaking lots of growth related works, typically you'll see higher development charges. We do have projects that benefit both existing and future development, and through development charges, we're only collecting the portion of those projects that benefit future growth. I always like to use my water tower example. So where I live near Ripley, they recently built a water tower. That water tower services everybody who already lives in Ripley, but it's also sized for new growth, some future development. So through development charges, they're collecting a portion of that whole project based on the capacity that's in there for future growth. So we're a piece of the pie is what we always say. Next slide, please. So through development charges, there's some, they define the capital works that you can collect for. And that includes cost related to acquiring lands. That does exclude parklands. Sorry, Paul. The cost to improve lands if you need to lease or improve buildings, as well as facility costs, and then some types of furniture and rolling stock. You cannot collect for computer equipment. I'm not sure the rationale behind that, but that's one of those rules that's set out in the Development Charges Act. And importantly, we can also collect on the interest related to capital costs. And this comes into play when we talk about big projects where you're looking at debenturing. So we want to make sure that we recoup those costs as well. Next slide, please. So this slide shows one of our typical calculation pages that you would find in Appendix B of one of our reports for development charges. So it outlines the project, gives a little bit of a description of what the project is and the area that benefits from it. And what we have to do when we calculate development charges is we take the total cost, we have to net out any grants or subsidies that you've received, and then we figure out how much of that project benefits existing and future growth. So this is again a water tower example. I'm a big water tower kind of girl. We know just based on capacity, how much of that project benefits existing and how much is for future. And then from there, we can calculate a development charge on a per capita basis for the residential side of things, and then a square meter or square foot basis for non-residential. Next slide, please. So currently, you collect development charges for a number of different service categories. These include sewage in Lucan and Granton, water in Lucan and Granton, stormwater in Lucan, transportation, administrative, which includes studies, fire services, library services, parks and recreation. And a fun fact, your last bylaw was passed March 17th, 2020, which was probably your last in-person council meeting right before the pandemic. I seem to recall that date very specifically. So under your current development charge, you collect just a little short of $7,000 for a single detached unit in Lucan. All these figures on this slide are for single detached units. In Granton, about $5,500 for a single detached unit, and then $2,000 out in the remainder of the municipality or the township. You currently only collect development charges against residential development. There's no development charge for non-residential. And you have a number of exemptions in your bylaw, and a lot of these are standard across different municipalities. So development charges aren't charged against churches and cemeteries, bona fide farm buildings. So if I build a drive shed, you don't collect development charges on that. And then you have a clause in your development charge as well that captures instances when, unfortunately somebody's house burns down and they have to build a new house. You don't charge development charges against that new house, that rebuild essentially, as long as they get it done within a certain amount of time. And they build like for like. So the money you collect through development charges does have to go into development charge reserves. And the money that goes into your development charge reserve accounts can only be used for development charge projects. And the money that's collected goes either against debt repayment for projects that are already built, or it sets up a little piggy bank for projects that you're going to build. And then it gets paid out when those projects go forward. So in 2020, you collected just a little under $500,000 in development charges. And then I'd also like to point out from this table that you spent about half of that on projects. So that's good. Like we want to see money coming in as well as money going out towards projects that are being repaid or being built. So there is a process you have to follow to implement a new development charge bylaw, and this is set out in the Act. And the first step is undertaking a background study. The background study looks at growth and the projects. We go back and we look at what projects you've already got. Are the costs still reasonable? Do they need to be updated? Have you already collected enough for them? Are they paid out? Are there new projects? So we look at all that, and then we calculate the development charges for each project. Once that's done, we then do as we are doing today. We come to council and we say, this is what we've got. Let's talk about it. And then it's up to council to set a proposed amount if they want to go with what's in the report, or if they want to go with an amount that's lower. And then we take that to a public meeting. We also start working on the draft bylaw. This time we'll have to do a bit more work on the draft bylaw since we've had a fair number of legislative changes that we'll have to include this time around. So you host a public meeting, and once you've had that public meeting and 60 days have passed since you've had that draft bylaw, or the draft report, ready, you can then pass a new development charge bylaw. There is a 40-day appeal period that follows passage of the bylaw. Next slide, please. So the first step in working on a new draft background report is working with staff to review the projects that were in the last one. So this slide has all the projects that either changed or were removed from the last development charge background study. And this is a function of the project either being completed and paid out, or changes to the law in terms of what we can collect for now. So an example of some of the ones that changed are the Lucan sewage treatment plant re-rating. So that project has been paid for. So it's now time to pull that out of the development charges. For the trunk sewer projects, we updated project costs. Even since 2020, when we last did this, costs have changed significantly. So we have the opportunity to make those cost estimates much closer to what they are in reality now. Capital studies, unfortunately, we're no longer allowed to collect for those. So we have to pull all those out of the background study. We updated project costs for roads and sidewalk projects. The salt storage facility has been built, and now we know we had an estimate in the development charge bylaw or background study before, and now we have the tender cost, the actual cost, so we'll put those in. For parkland development, we've updated the costs associated with developing parkland. And then for Granton, the parkland development, we actually have sufficient funds to pay for the next kind of 10 years of growth. So we'll pull that out of development charges for this round. And the next go round, you'd have a look at that again and see if it's, has the money been spent? Maybe it's time to put it back in. So apparently I'm still stuck in 2022. This should read 2023. Maybe I work on fiscal years or something subconsciously. But these are the projects that will be included in the 2023 background report. The projects that are highlighted in the kind of orange color are new projects. So this, of course, includes the expansion to the wastewater treatment plant in Lucan. That's a fairly major project. We have a sidewalk plow, and then a number of parks projects, including the soccer complex, the community center expansion, and an all-wheels park. So when we calculated the development charges, I'm going to go through each service area. We have development charges of about $35,000 for Lucan. This, of course, is reflective of the wastewater sewage treatment plant project, which I'm sure isn't a surprise to anybody around this table. It equates to about, for a single detached home, about $20,000 of the development charge. So it is significant, but it's not unreasonable. And it's, as we said in the EA, that's about where we expected it to come in at. And those project costs do include debenturing, as we expect the municipality, the township will be debenturing that project over a number of years. So we've included those borrowing costs in the development charge so that you can recoup those costs moving forward. The water services, stormwater, fire, and library charges have remained relatively the same. They've even maybe decreased a little since last time, but in terms of transportation and parks and recreation, we do see an increase in those development charges, and that's a function of increased project costs, especially in the transportation. You've got some significant roadworks projects included in the development charges, and then just more projects in the parks and recreation category than was in previously. In terms of non-residential development charge, the calculated amount is $6.17 per square foot for Lucan. In Granton, the development charge is calculated at $6,841. And this again reflects, this increase reflects the addition of projects in the transportation category, the Parks and Recreation category primarily. And then out in Granton, your non-development or non-residential development charge would be 64 cents a square foot. In the remainder of the township, the development charge, the calculated development charge has increased to about $36,000. And again, this reflects the sorry, my mistake, 3,600. And this reflects the parks and recreation projects being included. And then out in the rural area of the municipality, your non-residential development charge is about 46 cents per square foot. So if we compare this to the 2020 DCs, it's obviously a significant increase in Lucan, and this is primarily a function of the wastewater treatment plant. This project, about $22 million in costs is attributed to future growth. That again includes your debenturing and interest costs. And you have about $7.4 million attributed to future growth in your roads projects as well. On a municipal wide basis, your new projects in the Parks and Recreation service category are what's driving the increases in Granton and the remainder of the municipality, and that includes the soccer complex, the arena, and the All Wheels Park projects. So we look at this in terms of the overall development charge capital works program. The total net project costs for the projects that are included in development charges is about just a little short of $48 million. Of that $48 million, about 34 is attributable to future growth. And I just want to highlight, because previously this township has not had non-residential development charges, there's about $1.6 million that's attributable to non-residential growth. In the past, not having non-residential development charges here, just because you had so little non-residential development, you weren't leaving money on the table essentially. But now we've got we've got some really major projects that have some major costs attributed to non-residential. I wouldn't recommend excluding non-residential development charges from consideration in your bylaw. There's more and more municipalities are including non-residential development charges. It's not seen as an incentive anymore because everybody seems to know that if we don't charge these non-residential development charges, that money has to come from the rest of the tax base. So it's time for them to pay their share as well, is the kind of consensus we've been seeing around other municipal councils. So in terms of a new bylaw, we'll have to work on your existing bylaw to update it to include the legislated changes that came around with Bill 23. So this includes exemptions for third units in municipal areas with municipal servicing, the mandatory phasing in of development charges. As you recall, for the first 4 years of development charges, you have to phase in your calculated charge. It starts at 80% of the calculated charge in year 1 and then works its way towards 100% in year 5. And then there's also discounts for rental units that's included now. So it's, if you have a 3-bedroom rental unit, you get a 25% discount. If you have 2 bedrooms, it's 20, and then any other residential rental development gets 15% kind of off their development charges. And that's something that comes straight out of the Development Charge Act. I suggest that we maintain your current exemptions for churches, cemeteries, and bona fide farm buildings. That's something most municipalities do, and it makes a lot of sense in a lot of cases. And I also recommend that you collect non-residential development charges moving forward, just because it does make up such a, there's $1.6 million that you need to collect from someone, and it might as well be the person or the people who are benefiting. Quite often when we do these development charge background studies, we're often asked, well, what's the neighbor doing? Let's peek over the fence and see what's happening around. And I'm happy to show all the numbers, but I like to caution that it's not an apples to apples comparison, because development charges are based on the projects that you are doing for growth, and your neighbor might be doing lots and they might be doing nothing. So just keep that in mind as we look at these numbers. So I pulled numbers from other municipalities in the Middlesex area, as well as your neighbors to the north. So in London, in the growth area, for a single detached unit, they're looking at about $44,000. In the non-growth area, 28. In Middlesex Center, in the urban area, about 33. In North Middlesex, in their urban areas, it's about 19. Adelaide Metcalfe, about 11,000. In Strathroy, 26, and then out in the rural areas, about 13. In South Huron, they're about 5, and then in Thames Center, they're about 37.
Through you, Madam Mayor, if I can ask a question. Lisa, do you know any of the dates of some of these when they were implemented? Because that's going to have a big impact, I would think, because construction costs have astronomically gone up.
A lot of these have been recently updated. Like I would say most of them up between 2020 and today, most of them have been updated.
Thank you.
So if we think about what your development charges are now, they're definitely on the low end compared to, most of the other municipalities around. And, like these other municipalities, you folks have big projects coming down the pipes, and these development charges reflect big projects. So in terms of next steps for the development charge process, I'll take input on any changes to the bylaw from council, staff. We hope to schedule a public meeting and issue the notice. We have to get that out 20 days in advance. We have to post the draft bylaw 2 weeks ahead of that public meeting. And then we would host that public meeting, take any feedback, and then it's up to council to decide what they want to do with that feedback, and then pass a bylaw. Okay.
Thank you for that, Lisa. Big numbers, big change. But as you said a couple times, I don't think that's surprising, and it shouldn't be surprising to anyone to see this sort of report come out. Councillor Westman.
Yeah, just one thing that came up during some of the graphs there. Why aren't we collecting for stormwater in Granton and the remainder of the township? That is maybe a simple answer. I'm not sure. Thanks.
The simple answer is that there's no specific project. So if you were undertaking some major works,
Through you, Madam Mayor, if I can answer that question. There are no formal storm sewers in Granton. There's municipal drains. Yeah, so they're covered under the Municipal Drainage Act as opposed to the development charges.
Okay, any other questions or comments for Lisa? Councillor Hodgins.
Thank you, Madam Mayor, through you to Lisa. I may have a couple questions or I may jump around a little bit.
Sure.
Just going through the report, but I guess the rates, you noted that these are the rates proposed within this background study are the ceiling. So, and then it's up to council to decide where we land on this. But essentially, is it correct that if we don't go to that ceiling mark, if we were to look at reducing it, then it's basically the existing tax base that would have to make up that deficit. Is that correct?
You're absolutely correct.
Okay, thank you. I was gonna ask the same question about stormwater in Granton. So with, I guess with all these major projects coming through in the pipeline over the next 10 years, there would likely be a requirement for additional administrative staff to support these projects, support the township through that. So is there included within this, is there additional municipal staff or administration to, like, is that included in the calculation?
It's not, unfortunately, operations and maintenance are not something we can collect for through development charges. The definition of capital costs in the development charges is very specific and unfortunately doesn't include people.
Okay, thank you. With the, like, when it was talking about the populations, I think it's the occupancy considerations in section 7.2.4. So it looks at single family residential, multi-units and apartments and the persons per unit. And I guess that's those percentages that are identified in table 7.2. Is that what establishes the final DC rate or the number?
Yeah, that's what we use to calculate the rate for a single detached unit versus an apartment. And that's based on numbers that we get from Statistics Canada.
Okay, and that was my follow-up to that, was like the census information and the stats can information that does identify, like, that's where we get those multi-units.
Yep.
2.63 persons. Okay.
Yep.
But I guess similarly with council has control, like, I'm just looking at like how high the multi-unit DCs come in relative to the single family DCs. And if we wanted to look at adjusting those, say, to encourage more multi-unit development or more compact and maybe sustainable forms of development, that's something that we could consider as council.
Yep, that is something you can consider.
Okay. Okay, I'll hold for now and I might come back.
That sounds good. Thank you for that. Any other questions or comments? Councillor Regan?
If I may, thank you, Madam Mayor. I was looking at one of the slides, number 13, the 2022 projects. The table, it says table summarizes the projects included in the DC calculations. I'm just wondering if I'm asking staff, is there anything else that needs to be on that list? Because we're talking about DCs for the next,
10 years
yeah,
now.
10 years. So when I'm looking at that and I see, of course, leading the list is the sewage treatment plant. But I'm just wondering if staff, if we could project a little farther and if there's anything else that may come up that we may need to consider on that list. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
So through you, Madam Mayor, to Councillor Regan, the list was based on senior staff meeting with the consultant. So we've had a couple meetings to try and, come up with the crystal ball, what's going to happen within the next 10 years. And so this list is sort of our best estimate as to what projects lie ahead for Lucan Biddulph within the next 10 years.
Just to follow up to that, or expansion of that, with the changes of Bill 23, so now it's 10 years, can we still revisit? So in the event that something does happen, we still have the ability to revisit?
Absolutely. You can still open it up whenever you like. But you do have to go through the whole process again, unfortunately. There's no easy amendment process to the development charges. You have to do a background study and do a public meeting and go through the rigmarole.
Okay,
Appreciate
all right.
that.
No, thank you very much. Thank you. Thank you,
Yeah,
Madam. No, that was the follow-up.
Okay,
Thank you very
sorry
much.
about that.
No, do not be sorry. Thank you.
Okay, any other questions? Maybe before I go back to Councillor Hodgins, if you don't mind. Lisa, you talked about with the apartments and the multi-units and the reduction of if you've got a 3-bedroom unit. And is that for any 3-bedroom unit, or does it have to meet some sort of affordability test?
Right now, it's for any rental unit. There is language in the Development Charge Act that refers to affordable and attainable housing. That all that is not in effect yet because they haven't been able to provide a definition of what affordable and attainable are. We'll keep an eye on that because it's in there. We expect something in the future to come out of that. And the way it reads right now is that those may be exempt from development charges, but I'm not going to try and read the mind of the current government and figure out what their plans are.
And then I know that there has also been maybe some different interpretation as to when the DC charge can be collected. And so I guess we go through the process and this is our DC charge as of May 31st. When can that charge then start to be collected?
As soon as you pass the bylaw. So if you pass it Wednesday, Thursday morning, you're collecting that new development charge amount.
And is that on, that's even on existing plans that we've got, or?
There is a bit of a twist for, it's for rental units and institutional, depending on when they submit either a site plan application or a zoning bylaw amendment. That is their trigger date for their development charges. If they need neither of those actions, then it's when they get their building permit.
Thank you for that clarification. And then just to, you did mention about the staggering. So it starts at 80% and then
80%
goes to
year one,
85,
85,
90,
90.
95, and
Yeah,
then 100.
that's right.
And then I guess just, well, and this would be part of the next steps. So the public meeting, we just have to have that 20 days prior to the passing of the bylaw. Is that?
Yes. Yeah. So we have to have a public meeting ahead of when you pass the bylaw. We need to have 20 days notice of that meeting taking place. We have to have the bylaw available for public review 2 weeks ahead of the public meeting. And then we can pass the bylaw 60 days after this report has been available for public review, which was Friday.
Okay. Okay. And then the appeal process is 40 days after that. How does that appeal process work? Does the appeal come to us or does it go to LPAT?
It goes to you and the OLT.
I guess that's what
Same
they're called now.
thing.
At least they didn't call it the OMB.
Oh, right.
Okay, Councillor Hodgins, did you have some more questions?
Thank you, Madam Mayor, through you. Just looking at the list of eligible services, there was just 2 that I wanted to ask if we had considered or looked at. And that was for policing services and transit services. Just wondering if there was any consideration or any, I guess, consultation with the OPP or with the regional transit folks to look at any potential projects for inclusion.
As far as I know, no. Typically, municipalities that have their own police services will have development charges related to those because they can show we have a direct capital cost for, we need to buy 2 new cruisers, or most municipalities that are within the OPP regime don't collect development charges. Just the way the funding formula works. It's not, because things are bought kind of on a bigger scale, on a regional scale. It's hard to say that, oh, well, 0.6 of that cruiser is for Lucan and, 0.2 is for somebody else. And so it's typically not collected for in municipalities that use the OPP. And I'm not familiar enough with the regional transit services around here to speak to those.
Okay, thank you. And then just in closing comments, I just want to say thank you, Lisa, and everyone at BM Ross for working on this, and our staff for putting this together. Very excited to see it coming forward and moving ahead in the future. Thank you.
Always happy to work here in Lucan Padolf.
Okay, any last questions or comments? I'll echo what Councillor Hodgins said, Lisa. The report is very well laid out, and I would encourage anybody that is watching this to go back onto our agenda and not only look at the PowerPoint, but to look at the report, because it details exactly how we have to collect DCs. You understand why the DC charge is what it is today and why it is being proposed to be changed. There shouldn't be any confusion out there to our residents why we've been able to have such a low DC rate up until now. So the report is excellent, and I would encourage our residents to go through it. So thanks very much, Lisa, and we certainly look forward to continuing to work with you. I guess I would just look to staff then. Have you thrown away around a date for a public meeting? Just so we can maybe get people thinking about that.
Madam Mayor, we have not discussed a meeting first. I guess that would be sort of premature to do that, depending on the outcome of today's meeting. So after today's meeting, we will be consulting with yourself and the rest of council and try and set up a date for a formal public meeting.
Great. All right. Well, thanks, Lisa. Appreciate you coming in this morning, and it's great.
Thanks
seeing
for
you.
having me.
With that, I would ask for a mover and a seconder. I guess there's no motion, just to accept for information.
Yes.
Okay. Councillor Regan and Councillor Hodgins. All in favor? And that's carried. Okay, we'll move on to the minutes, and we've got one set of minutes in front of us from March 21st. And I know you've all had the time to review that. So unless anything has to be amended, I would ask for a mover and a seconder to approve those as circulated. Councillor Westman and Councillor Regan, all in favor, and that's carried. Business arising from the minutes, I don't believe anything was added. Is there anything that council wanted added to business arising? Okay. Then moving on to correspondence. There's been one item that has been pulled by staff, and that comes from a resolution from Essex County. And Ron, did you want to speak to that?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. This is quite timely. We do in Lucan Padolf have one tax sale property that was it was sold, I believe it was probably, I'm going to guess here 4 years ago, in the village of Granton. There's, what I would consider a substantial amount of money sitting in the court system waiting to be distributed. And we are sort of in line to get that unless a family member pops up and claims that. So they do seem to be taking a lot of time to process that kind of thing. And so staff's recommendation is to endorse the resolution from the County of Essex to speed this process along.
Okay, any questions for Ron on that? Councillor Westman.
Limitation on it that a family or interested party would have to be able to lay claim to those funds? Because I mean, I'm familiar with the particular one, and I don't know that there is anybody really. I mean, that's one of those things where what happens if a property is left intestate, right?
Yeah,
Without
so
any-
through you, Madam Mayor, to Councillor Westman, to answer that question, the money's sitting there. It's just sitting there. It's not being used. I don't know what the rules and regulations are around how long that has to sit there, but we are at the mercy of the province when it comes to that. So I believe this motion will hopefully sort of spur them to do those things in a little more timely fashion. So it, obviously, if it doesn't go to the municipality, it would go to the province and it would get swallowed up by Ontario. So we think we're much better stewards of that pot of money. So we would much rather it come to us, and then we can use that money within the community. So.
Okay, if there isn't any further discussion on that, there is a recommended motion to endorse the resolution from the County of Essex. Can I get a mover and a seconder, please? Councillor Hodgins and Councillor Westman, all in favor? And that's carried. There, of course, is a number of items that we received, and I just wondered if there was any that council wanted to pull. Councillor Regan.
If I may, through you, Madam Mayor, I think it's number 15, and I was just the Emo Watch file. The one that I saw had to do with the normal farm practices protection board. And there was it looks like there was some public comment, or going to be some public comment. And the purpose, I think, was to take a look at sort of defining what normal farming practices were. And I thought, in light of our discussions on Thursday evening with a public meeting, was just pointing out to staff, perhaps that might be something we might investigate and see if there's any whatever comes from that, because that might help us a little bit in writing that proposed bylaw. I know it's just draft, but I just thought perhaps it might help us understand a little better what's going on provincially. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Okay, thank you for that. So staff can keep an eye on that. Okay, were there any other items? Councillor Hodgins.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Item number 2, the AOR's letter to heads of council regarding Enbridge Gas. I would like to move a motion to endorse that resolution within the within their letter.
Yeah, I don't know if staff wanted to speak to that at all. That was when I had highlighted, actually. Did you want, I guess we can move it now. The motion's right in front of us, just. So we'll just use the motion, the wording in the motion in the Enbridge letter. Yeah. Okay. All right, so that would be moved by Councillor Hodgins, seconded by Councillor Regan. Was there any discussion on that? Okay, all in favor? And that's carried. All right, were there any other items? I sent this to Councillor Regan. So you know how we support resolutions from our neighboring communities. I received a letter actually from a mayor in Blind River, and our motion that we had that we endorsed, but then it was circulated about barriers facing women in office. So Blind River was discussing it last night at their council meeting, and they were going to endorse our motion. So there is a ripple effect to these sort of things, and hopefully these sort of joint resolutions and endorsing those of our neighbors do affect the change that we want to see. With that, I would ask for a mover and a seconder to receive those items of correspondence for information purposes. Councillor Westman and Councillor Regan, all in favor? And that's carried. On to committee reports. Nothing obviously from Blue Water, since the deputy mayor is away. CEDC? No.
We have a next meeting scheduled, and I don't, sorry, I didn't have, we did have a meeting, but I didn't have the minutes. Sorry. So I couldn't redo a report right now.
Okay,
Sorry.
all right. So in the next meeting.
Next
Okay,
meeting,
that's fine.
sorry.
No worries. Nothing from Lake Huron, nothing from the fire boards, except, did you want to give or just?
Again, Madam Mayor, so through you to the rest of council, we did, last week, we did start the process of our fire services master plan with the consultant. The consultant spent 2 days in our community last week. Interviews, we did on-site interviews with the senior staff from both the fire department and the municipality. not only that, they also did do a tour of both fire halls. So they've got most of the background stuff, sort of the raw information that they're going to now process and start working forward. But yeah, it was a good couple days. They seem to be very knowledgeable in their field, so I'm looking forward to the next steps.
Thank you for that. ABCA, anything, Councillor Hodgson?
Nothing to report. We haven't had a meeting since our last council meeting. Just, I would note that in the balance of correspondence, there were the financial statements attached.
Thank you for that. Parks and Recreation.
Next meeting's trying to shoot for April 20th for our next meeting, but nothing since the last time.
Okay, on to our reports from staff. Ron.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. The report in front of council tonight is CAO-04-2023. It's a service agreement with the Occupational Safety Group, Inc. The report basically recommends that the township enter into an agreement with the Occupational Safety Group to proceed forward with our health and safety program. And we many thanks to Julie Overholt, who's sort of spearheading this process for us. Obviously, we started this some time ago, and we've been slowly working our way through it. It has become apparent that there simply isn't enough staff time to complete this project in-house. So we do require the services of a third party in order to review our existing program and policies, update, draft any new policies or procedures that are required under current legislation, and then guide and train staff in moving forward with workplace joint health and safety committee. So 2 companies were contacted to provide quotes. You can see in the report, OSG Safety Group and 4S Consulting were both of the respondents. And after we met with both companies to discuss their proposals, how they were going to proceed forward, the recommendation is that council go with the OSG Safety Group. It will be over a period of 2 years. And the 4S proposal, while a tighter timeline, would require substantially more staff participation and time. So that simply didn't really fall into what we are capable of doing. So that's sort of where we're at with the process. The impact of budget, we did allocate 26,000 in the 2023 budget. If council does support the recommendation, that budget will be spread over 2 years, not just in 2023. So happy to answer any questions.
Okay, thanks for that, Ron. Questions on this? Okay, then we've got a recommended motion in front of us, and that we receive the report and that we adopt the aligning bylaw and enter into an agreement with OSG. Is there a mover and a seconder for that, please? Councillor Regan and Councillor Hodgins. All in favor? That's carried. Did you have anything verbal, Ron? Tina, did you have anything? Okay. Building finance. Catherine, did you have anything?
Just wanted to mention that the auditors will be here next week to do our year-end audit for 2022.
Okay, thank you, Catherine. That'll be a good time, I'm sure, having the auditors here. They're a good group to work with. Planning, we've got Dan Fitzgerald joining us virtually. I didn't know, Dan, if there was anything that you wanted to highlight at this time.
Thanks, Madam Mayor and members of council. So just a note to council on the agenda today, there is a bylaw, which is the zoning bylaw amendment for 122 Kent Street. If council does recall, it was a amendment to sever off a lot on the front of Kent and then establish a residential third density proposal for the remainder of the lands. So council did previously vote to approve that. It's just it was subject to the depositing your reference plan and confirmation areas. So The applicant has now provided the municipality with a reference plan, and it has been deposited with the ministry. And we are good now to pass the zoning. So that is on council's agenda today. And I would just note that in discussions with the applicant in this case, we did apply a maximum height limit of 7.5 meters to any proposed development, which is intended to maintain any development on that site as a one-story. Available to answer questions.
Okay, thanks for that, Dan. Any questions for council or clarification on that? Okay, thanks very much. Appreciate that. And that comes up later in the meeting for approvals. Okay, thanks, Dan. On to Public Works. Jeff is not joining us, so I'll turn that over to you, Ron.
So I'll be Jeff this morning. So the first report is PW-05-2023, the traffic speed report. And this is an informational report. Council had requested this of the Public Works Department. And you can see we do have, the township has 2 speed display signs, and those signs we've moved around to various locations throughout the township just to try and get a record and get some sort of indication of what's happening out there with the speed of the vehicles on various roads. The first sort of graph there, you can see we did Elm Street northbound, southbound, Nicolline, east and west, Gilmore east and westbound, and as well we did Spencer Ave northbound. You can see the total vehicle counts in the third column there. And then the fourth column is the rate of speed for 85% of the road traffic that has gone through those things there. And you can see the speed that is on there, and it's quite interesting because you'd think by the number of complaints that we've had and have been made to the various members of council that we expected that to be more. And what it turns out is it's actually not they're not speeding. Most are not speeding. So that then becomes, is it really a problem, or is it a perception problem? And then does council want to do something? And one of the options is obviously to lower the speed limit in urban areas down to 40 kilometers an hour, which some municipalities have chosen to do. So that is an option that council may want to consider. The interesting one is the county roads, the collectors roads are the ones where we see the most of the violations. And that, and I guess it makes sense when you think about it, when you're coming into Clandeboye, for example, going northbound on Denfield Road. If everyone's like me, you kind of take your foot off the gas and you coast into an urban area. That's, Clandeboye is a little unique in that the urban side is kind of the east side of the roadway there. So it is a different one, but it's obviously an issue, and we do receive, I would suggest one of the most complained about areas is that section. The other 2 sections are Saintsbury north and south of Lucan proper. And again, it's a matter of people coming into an urban area, taking the foot off gas and sort of coasting in. So again, it is a county road. Those are county roads. Denfield Road and Saintsbury are both county roads. It appears Jeff has talked to Chris Trainey at the county, and the county, generally does not have a problem if we want to lower the speed limit. They will do that for us. So it's a matter of requesting. I think there needs to be some further discussion there, how we do that. Do we put a permanent speed sign in those locations in sort of the worst areas? Is that something that council wants to, spend money on? They're about $5,000 per unit to do that. Will it make a difference? Will it permanently make a difference? Is it re-education? Is it a combination of that plus enforcement with OPP? So there's a number of different factors that council could consider. So at this point, the information presented today is simply for council to digest, think about which direction council wants to go in the future. And I'd say happy to answer any questions, but I'm not sure I can, I can answer them. But if, you know, I think at this point, it's good information to have, and if the members of council could go back to some of the people who were complaining and maybe show them the information, the data is the data. We can't, you know, I don't think there's any disputing the fact, the numbers are the numbers. But again, it's a perception. We've mentioned this a lot on the main street of Lucan. If you have a transport truck doing 50 kilometers an hour down the main street of Lucan and there's vehicles parked on both sides, you're thinking that that's going too fast. But they are complying with the speed limit. So it is a bit, you know, it's a bit of a perception issue, but we do have the ability, I guess, to slow traffic down if that's what council wants.
Okay, thank you for that, Ron. Questions or comments from council? Councillor Westman.
Yeah, through you, Madam Mayor. So it's pretty interesting. I know I'm going to get some feedback from the folks in my ward. We have two signs in Granton. Are we not collecting data from them? I kind of thought we were, and I'd be interested to see that in a report as well.
I can ask that question. Obviously, it's not contained within this report, but I do agree with you. I think we did have that, whether it just didn't make it onto this report or not, but I can certainly bring that forward to Jeff and have him follow that up.
Councillor Regan.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I really, what I would sort of like to see, I'm just throwing it as a comment, if I may, is that we reduce these speeds to 40. We post those signs. I find that those permanent, the permanent speed signs that actually flash actually do have an impact. I really do. I mean, the argument could be that people get used to them and they're desensitized. And I actually think they do make an impact, because you're driving into some communities when I'm going into school or something, and they flash, and it doesn't matter if it's a yellow or red flag. All of a sudden, it's like, okay, I got to slow down because I'm coming into a smaller community than Lucan or Lucan, but often. So I think too, when I take a look at some of those straightaways that we have, and my other argument too, is, if I may, is that if you say 50, people are going to go 65. If you say 40, they're going to go 50. That's just the way we are. I mean, that's just the way we drive. We know that. If we're in the highway, it always seems to be that 10-kilometer thing. The other thing too, is I think when you mentioned education, and I've mentioned this before, and I did actually have a complaint that was out in Clandeboye. I did call the OPP, and they were here actually, and they had the guys go out there, and they were caught a number of people that were violations. My argument is that, you know, nothing says education, and I know that Jeff has mentioned that before, but nothing says education like $125 traffic ticket. And I got to be honest with you. So I'm thinking I mean, that education part is great, but I think we're at a point now, we've been discussing this a long time, and that education point to me, I think, is over. And I think what we need to do is we have to start taking some action. So I understand it's $5,000 a pop, but the signs where they're permanent as a reminder to people to slow down coming in Saintsbury into town. I know people come in there they're hitting that sign out in front of, you know, Nicoline and Watson, and I know they're coming in at 80 clicks an hour. I know they are. So, I mean, I know they're not going 50, so, or whatever it is. So I think, again, with that, along with some, maybe getting the OPP involved a little more, again, you know, getting a fine, that's, you know, that word gets out, I know. So anyway, that's just my comment. Thank you.
Yeah, no, I appreciate those comments, Councillor Regan, and they echo a lot what I've been thinking. Those county road statistics, we can't ignore them now that we have those statistics in front of us. So I think it does spur us to take some sort of action. And what that action is, I'm in agreement. I think it's a consideration of those speed signs, especially out in Denfield, the reduction of the speed. What I might suggest for my colleagues, and I might look to Ron to back me up on this, is maybe, since Jeff is not here today, maybe he can look back on the discussion and bring a staff report at the next council meeting as to how we go about reducing those speeds, what that looks like. I don't think it's enough for us just to put up our hands and say, reduce the speeds. I think we have to get an understanding of how that happens and how that works and exactly what the purchase of speed signs looks like and that sort of thing. Ron?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. The one thing I was going to suggest is that if you look at the county road table in front of you there, the Saintsbury North, so people coming from the north into Lucan, you know, the total vehicle count was 3,917 and the total number of vehicles over the speed limit was 3,327. I mean, that's hard to ignore. That's most. So I think sort of an interim measure would be to send this to the OPP and say, here's the statistics we have. So they can do that whilst whilst council is still debating how to move forward. Again, you know, the police are happy to help out. They just need a phone call request and I'm sure they'd be happy to do that. And with this information, it's pretty obvious where the hotspots are.
Okay, thank you for that. Any other comments or questions on this report? Councillor Hodgins?
Thank you, Madam Mayor, through you. I guess the discussion or the option to look at reducing neighborhood streets to 40 kilometers per hour. I think they're all currently 50. I'm just thinking maybe we need to look at that specifically on its own, just to understand what all the implications are. So maybe having that come back to its own staff report for our consideration and decision might be better than just, you know, deciding it as an option for another report. But thank you.
No, I agree with that. So we'll leave it with Ron to communicate that back to Jeff and they can work on something to bring back to us. Okay. Any other comments or questions? Okay, with that, I would ask for a mover and a seconder that we receive that traffic speed report for information. Councillor Regan and Councillor Hodgins. All in favor? And that's carried. Okay, and the next one is the grader report.
Thank you, Madam Mayor, and I'll do my best to work our way through this one. I am not the technical person on this, but reading through this, it was fairly straightforward. Obviously, the Volvo motor grader, it's already in the budget to be to order a replacement for 2023. Obviously, the delivery time on a new grader is 12 to 14 months, so we would not get it this year, and it'd be at some point next year when we got it. The reason we were looking at doing that was because Volvo motor graders are known for this specific repair. And that is obviously the internal coolant leak. The best case scenario is a head gasket replacement, which is be under $5,000 and it's in and out in less than 2 weeks. But the more likely scenario is, and this is based on, all the other public works managers and Volvo that have Volvo motor graders, that the more likely cause of this internal coolant leak is a shift in their cylinder sleeves. If this is in fact the case, which both Jeff and Joe suspect, it's gonna not be a cheap fix. Obviously, the estimate is about $60,000, and it about a month of downtime. Like I said, Jeff strongly believes this to be the case, so that's sort of the worst case scenario. So he's got 3 options in his report here. The first option is we can choose not to do the repair. The township would then rent a grader until a new one arrives. This is not recommended due to the rental cost being about $8,500 per month, which quickly approaches the repair cost. So option number 2, the township can approach a contractor or a neighboring municipality for assistance until a replacement grader is received. This is feasible. Control on the quality of maintenance could still be an issue, and it still will be a considerable cost. It doesn't come for free. Option number 3, the township can make the repair and continue to use the grader. This is the recommended option on the part of staff. The repair increases the resale value. It is hard to predict numbers, but there is an indication from a supplier of rental graders that with the engine repair done, the township would get the majority of the repair cost back in a trade-in value. In discussion with Pro Mechanical, the repair solves the sleeve problem. Other municipalities who have proceeded with the repair have indicated that they have had no issues even years after the repair. As part of my recommendation, I would hold off moving forward with the replacement in 2023 until 2025. So that pushes the replacement out 2 years. And this is assuming it's the worst case scenario and we have to spend the $60,000 to fix that sleeve. The motor issue was what concerned staff, and that's why it was in the budget for 2023 replacement. So now that, we've kind of missed our window of opportunity there, you might say. So the recommendation is to fix it. If we're really lucky, it'll be the cheaper of the two. But more than likely, it'll be the $60,000 fix, but that will also extend the life of that piece of equipment for 2 years. Not having to expend the full replacement cost, that money then sits in, can continue to accrue interest sitting in our reserve account as well. So you can see under the impact to budget, the repair and the rental of the machine while ours is being repaired will go to the operational budget line item of the greater repair and maintenance. The actual line item will be over the budgeted number of 10,000. The shortfall can be covered through any surplus in the 2023 budget or from the equipment reserve fund. If the reserve fund is used, then it is proposed to replenish the fund with additional interest earned in 2023 and 2024. So again, the recommendation from the Public Works manager and staff is that the council go with option number 3.
Okay, thank you very much for that, Ron. You did a very good job of speaking to the issues. Any questions or comments on the report in front of us? Councillor Regan.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I just have just for now, one question. Have we already ordered the new one? Do you know? We haven't ordered it. Okay. All right. I wasn't sure because the way it was written, it was like, we've already ordered it. We've got to wait 12 more months. So by just ordering it a little bit farther down the line, it's okay. Thank you.
Any other questions or comments? All right, then the recommended motion is in front of us. And I would ask for a mover and a seconder, please. Councillor Westman and Councillor Regan, all in favor? And that's carried. Okay. And then the next one, Ron.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. The third one's the easiest, the annual dust suppressant tender results. So Jeff and his staff have gone out for quotes on dust suppressant. You can see the 4 submitted tenders in there. They are Denmar Brines was the low at $87,540. And you can see the highest one was by a numbered company, 552976 Ontario Limited. And that amount was $166 or $166,464 even. Quite a difference. After reviewing the details of each tender submitted, all were found to meet the specs of the tender. The tender received by Denmar Brines proved to be the lowest, and this amount is within the 2023 budgeted amount of $88,000. So with that, Madam Mayor, the recommendation is to award the dust suppressant tender to Denmar Brines.
Okay, thank you for that. Any questions on that? Councillor Hodgins.
Thank you, Madam Mayor, and through you. Just looking at the prices and the bids submitted, I'm seeing like Denmar Brines is so significantly below the other 3, and it just sort of jumps out a little bit. And so my question is, going with this company, and I'm not sure if you're gonna have the answer, Ron, but I guess how are we ensuring that we're getting the same quality product and service going with the low bid here compared to the other ones? Like, are there, I guess, quality procedures in place to make sure that we're getting good quality dust suppressant material?
Sorry, through you, Madam Mayor, to Councillor. I think Denmar Brines, and I think they're the usual winner of this. And if my memory serves me correctly, they've always been low by, a substantial amount. It's almost, you wonder how these other ones are staying in business if Denmar Brines can always undercut them by that much. So I would say that Denmar Brines have done our business for the last number of years, and if there was an issue with that, they would have been excluded from the bidding. So that's the best answer I can give you at this point.
Okay, I mean, I guess that's reassuring if we've worked with them year over year and not had issues. But it jumps out with the other three prices being in the closer range and then this being so significantly lower. Thank you.
Councillor Regan, did you? have a comment?
If I may, Madam, I've been involved in the opening tender process a few times, and I've asked the same sort of question. But I'm assured by staff that there's there's specs on this and that they're always being met. So I've just been witness to that. So I let the councillor know that I think they meet that standard that we have for the municipality.
Okay, thank you for that. Any other comments on this? Then I would ask for a mover and a seconder for the motion in front of you. Councillor Westman and Councillor Regan. All in favor? And that's carried. Did you have anything else with Public Works, Ron?
I believe that's it. Mayor. Thank you.
Paul,
Thank you through Madam Mayor. There's no reports today, but just a few quick verbals. A reminder that the annual Easter egg hunt through the Optimist Club of Lucan will be held 10 to 11 on Friday in Elm Street and 12 to 12:30 in Granton Centennial Park. On that as well, we've been able to add some public skates this weekend for families. We have Friday from 1 to 3, Saturday 10 to 12, and 1 to 3, and Monday from 1 to 3 as well. So we're posting those to the website to remind people, but just if you're out in the community, make sure to pass it along. Also, the opening for summer camp opened yesterday, and I'm proud to say we've already serviced 90 families. So we are doing quite well at being able to service our community that way.
thank you very much for that, Paul. That is excellent news on the summer camp, and certainly happy to see the Easter eggs back. And thank you for offering public skating to families. That's amazing. Okay, economic development.
Just a quick one. Our annual pitch-in day is April 22nd that council and staff usually participate in that morning. So if you could let me know who would be volunteering to assist in the cleanup day, that would be perfect. Thank you.
Okay, thanks for that, Lisa. Okay, councillor comments. Councillor Westman.
Wasn't sure where to speak to it, but we had our first Trails Committee get together, our meeting. It was well attended, and we were able to elect a co-chair or a vice chair. That's Ken Lee. Some really good input. One thing that I can take away from it is that a lot of our members were not completely aware of the extent of what we already have. You know, we had some great discussion about that in the beginning of the meeting, where people were talking about, you know, we need to do more, and we were able to show them through. Paul was kind enough to bring some detailed photos of our current trail systems, and we had also discussed about having conversation with developers to include them, and including the recently proposed subdivision over on Sainsbury, where they include trails and multi-use courts and things like that into their planning. So we're looking forward to what we can accomplish going forward. The one question that came forward, I think that is on everyone's mind, is how do we fund this? And so, you know, we're looking to council to see if there can be funds allocated for some of that work going forward, and obviously looking to the community and to developers to take part in that as well, because I think what we've accomplished already is a great start. And the fact that we are now engaging the developers a little bit more completely, we're getting them involved in the process. It'll be interesting to see how we're able to tie them all together, and you know, we've got a great start. And now there are some isolated trails like the Martins Trail that I think there's potential to be able to join that together with some of the other trail systems. So It's looking good now. There was some conversation about bike paths and multi-use trails. Obviously, going forward with the commercial development down here, there's a talk about how do we connect to that, and some great conversation about multi-use paths there, and building some in behind it as well to link in with any future residential developments. So some good conversation, and I think we have a really solid committee. There's some amazing people on it with a great, strong background in well, engineering and planning and education, and so we've got a strong committee. I think we're going to do great. So thank you.
Great. Thank you very much for that, Councillor Westman. How often did you decide that you were going to meet, or is there a formal schedule of meetings?
Yeah, there is.
To you, Madam Mayor, we are meeting every opposing month to the Pratt Committee.
Okay, great. Well, we'll certainly look for further information coming from the New Trails Committee. Any other councillor comments? So I have one, and obviously I'm wearing the Thamesford Trojans jersey this morning. And of course, this was because of the the bet I had with my friend Marcus Ryan, the mayor of Zura Township, as Thamesford and the Irish met in the first round of playoffs, and Thamesford obviously moved on in the process. So I am wearing the Thamesford jersey. I told Marcus, I said, these were the original colors of the Lucan Irish with the bright yellow and green. So, they're just trying to imitate us, but I'm a good sport, and I know that next year it will be different. And when I return it, I put together actually a basket of some Lucan goodies, made in Lucan products and that sort of thing. That Marcus can either raffle off or do in a draw or something like that. So Thamesford can come to Lucan and continue to support local. And for those of you that still want to see junior hockey, Thamesford and Mount Bridges, they start their series, I believe, tonight. And as much as I'm an Irish supporter, I think that many of us predicted that this would be the final for the area. They're two very strong teams. They're exciting to watch, and it'll be an exciting series. And I did hear through the grapevine that the mayor of Strathroy and Marcus have a similar bet going on. So all in good fun, all in good fun. With that, we'll move on. No changes to budgets, any notices of motion? So with that, we'll move into our motions. We have one motion in front of us. I won't read it. It is fairly lengthy, but this comes out of our discussion at our last council meeting where we supported a resolution where it was recommended that we support a resolution that came from the Township of Warwick. And this has to do with trying to engage CN Railway for contribution requirements under the Drainage Act. So if anybody's interested in the exact wording of that motion, they can of course refer to our agenda. With that, I would ask for a mover and a seconder on this motion. Councillor Regan and Councillor Hodgins. All in favor? And that's carried. We have three bylaws in front of us this morning. That's bylaw 18-2023 to authorize the execution of an agreement with OSG. Bylaw 203-2023 to amend the Lucan Biddulph Comprehensive Zoning Bylaw for 122 Kent Street. Bylaw 19-2023, and this one is our confirming bylaw for today's meeting. With that, I would ask for a mover and a seconder that if no one cares to speak to these bylaws inclusively, that's 18-2023 and 19-2023 and 203-2023 on their first, second, and third reading, that they be considered to have been read a first time and passed, read a second time and passed, and read a third time and passed. Mover and a seconder. Councillor Westman and Councillor Hodgins, all in favor? And that's carried. And a motion to adjourn at 10:35 a.m. Councillor Regan, Councillor Westman, all in favor? That's carried. Thank you very much. We will see you actually in 3 weeks. We've got a delay in meetings because of OGRA. Have a great